Om Asato Ma Sadgamaya Tamaso Ma Jyotirgamaya Mrityorma Amritam Gamaya Om Sahana Bhavatu Sahano Bhunaktu Sahaviryam Karavavahe Tejasvinavadhitamastu Ma Vedvishavahe. Om Guru Brahma Guru Vishnu Guru Devo Maheshwara Guru Sakshat Parabrahma Tasmai Shri Gurave Namaha. Let us take a deep breath in. Hold the breath. Focus inward at the third eye. And slowly exhale. Inhale again deeply. Hold the breath. Focus deeply at your third eye. And slowly exhale. Inhale again deeply. Hold the breath. Focus deeply at your third eye. And slowly exhale. And with the next exhalation, slowly come into the space. Namaste and welcome to this magnificent gathering called the Celebration of Love. It is such a great title. Always, love is always a great topic for us to explore, for us to give attention to, for us to ultimately embody and realize. But specifically in these times, it is even more important that we give attention to this fundamental quality of existence that is love. For such is the law of nature. Whatever we give attention to most consistently, we start to naturally embody its values. Attention is the supreme currency of life. It is through attention that we ultimately spend our life. And as the law of nature goes, yatha chitta tatha prana. Wherever there is attention, there is energy. And wherever there is energy, there is growth. So whatever we give attention to, it starts to grow within us. So the intention of this magnificent gathering, the celebration of love, is to really individually and collectively organize ourselves around love, give our attention to love, so that love becomes the dominant quality within the field of our awareness. And when we can consistently maintain that over a period of time, a great opportunity, a great possibility opens up where love can be our living reality. These are intense times for the whole of our species. I say our species because particularly this event of this global event that humanity has been facing over the last year and a half or so, or almost 2 years now, is fundamentally an event which is affecting the species that is Homo sapiens. In these times, and as we are seeing, there is a lot of divisiveness that is going on. We are using a lot of time the platforms of technology, of internet, to really organize hate, to be organized around opinions that are divisive, to be organized around specific agendas of separation. So it becomes even more important that we intentionally gather and organize ourselves around the shared intention of love. Not love as a merely emotional concept, but love as a fundamental driving force of our life. From the yogic perspective, there is only the self. So when we speak of love within yoga, we are not really speaking of love at the level of plurality, at the level of multiplicity, at the level of duality even. Primarily, when we are speaking of love, we are really speaking of love at the level of Advait, meaning indivisibility. So love is not between two. At the fundamental level, love is. It is the fundamental value of being. And being, the nature of being, is indivisible. The experience of isolated self, encased in a mind-body structure, separate from all, is a relevant experience, yet it is not the fundamental reality of who we are. So when we are speaking of love, we are really speaking of the experience of self. If we do not know ourselves at the deepest level, if we are constantly driven outwards in the seeking of love, looking for love out there, coming from a positionality of lovelessness, from a positionality of disconnect, from a positionality of ego, then our fundamental experience of life is of lovelessness. And that state of being which is disconnected, which is fundamentally experiencing an absence of love, seeks love constantly outside of itself. So behind its seeking of love is this constant anxiety, this emptiness, this void, this fear that one might never find love. And when one does even find love in the relative, without this experience of the absolute, within that discovery of love in the relative, disconnected from the fundamental ground of being, there is dominance of fear, politics, control. And that is why the yogis, the masters, since time immemorial, have pointed in the direction of our inner nature when speaking of love. In the great Chandogya Upanishad, it says, from love we have come, to love we are sustained, and ultimately to love we shall return. It is not trying to find love. It is not about trying to learn to love. First, it is about experiencing love. And the experience of love, at its purest sense, is the experience of self. As we dive deep within ourselves, and this is a movement which is not in space. This movement within ourselves is within our own consciousness. When we begin to really dive deep within ourselves, we begin to make contact with that fundamental ground of our own being. Love rises up within the field of our experience. In that silence, in that presence, there is love. The experience of the disconnected self starts to fade. That is not the dominating value within the field of our awareness anymore. Connection dominates, not disconnect. This journey in the direction of our essential self is the journey of love. The experience of your own true nature is the experience of love. That's the profound shift from fundamentally experiencing life as lovelessness, as an absence of love, to presence of love, to lovingness. And as we can consistently create that space within our life, where we can infuse our mind, infuse our body, infuse our energy with this supreme understanding and this experience of love which rises up within us, then naturally we become more and more capable of lovingness. Then we are not walking around in this world as an isolated value of awareness, as an isolated point of awareness where our fundamental experience of the universe is of hostility, of an alien. But rather, we move through this universe as an expression of this universe. We do not merely understand it as an intellectual idea, but we can begin to experience it at a deep level. And we verify this consistently through our own inner experience. Then in the relative reality, we get to practice love. In the relative reality, there is multiplicity dominates. At the transcendent, unity dominates. When we can take our awareness to the transcendent and allow that unity to be experienced, there is love. There is the presence of love. And then as we move in the relative reality, in this world of plurality, where it's space and time and multiple variables which are constantly in a state of flux, we get to practice love. We get to practice lovingness. Then our life becomes an expression of love. There, love becomes a commitment in the relative reality. But to be able to follow through on this commitment of living from love, we must have an experience of love at the fundamental level. We must be accessing that love in our presence, that is here and now. And then, as we move in the relative reality, as I said before, we practice love. Then we realize that at any given point of time, anything that is ever happening is love. That's our commitment, and we really live by it. Then we are able to honor the great Sufi mystic teaching, move the way love makes you move, not the way fear makes you move. For when we are moving through fear, we are not really living. We are just avoiding life. We're kind of passing time till time is over. The invitation of this life is to experience this magnificent reality in its fullest. And that experience, that invitation, becomes more and more accessible to us through lovingness. But I will emphasize it again, without a fundamental experience of love. And for that experience, we create space in our life where we dive deep every day, consistently to that presence. We keep returning to that presence within us. And then in the relative reality, we practice love. Doesn't matter what is going on. We look at it with the understanding of love, that this universe, this life is my ally. The unknown is my ally. It's not my enemy. This, what I see around, is an extension of myself. Yes, there are different beings and different human beings who are all on their own journey. Yet at the fundamental level, this extended reality is a loving one. And that understanding gets verified over and over again as you remain consistent with your commitment to be choosing lovingness. Then love becomes the great clearing in which your life happens. Love is the container in which all the story of your life is held. Even the difficult moments, the challenging moments, but naturally the charming and the pleasurable moments of life. But we are living in the field of relativity. In the relative reality, there is duality and plurality. So to a light there is a shadow, to a laughter there is a tear. To a victory there is a loss. Such is the nature of relative reality. But when we can really have this deep understanding and this deep knowingness, then love is the container within which all our life can play out. Even tears become an expression of love. And all experience of life, the challenging experiences and the not challenging experiences, give us a deeper and deeper understanding of love in the relative reality. Then our whole life becomes a learning of love, an expression of love, a deepening of our understanding of love, a deepening of our capacity to embody love. Yoga ultimately means love, unity, from isolation, which is the ego, to unity. And as we are practicing this love, the love doesn't have to look a certain way. When you are capable of experiencing love and when you can cognize the presence of love, when you give yourself the permission to experience the love that is here, that is at the fundamental level of your being, then love shows up in this relative reality in this most magnificent manner. Then love shows up as awe, just being in awe of this mysteriously magnificent reality. Love shows up as deep state of gratefulness, a grateful heart which becomes the magnet of miracles. Love shows up as forgiveness. Forgiveness of self, forgiveness of others. Love shows up as courage to lean in the direction of the unknown, to face the challenges, to climb the mountains. Love shows up as patience. Love shows up as kindness, as generosity, as compassion. Love shows up as detachment. All these longings, all these supreme qualities that make this life so beautiful are all aspects of love. We have to be very aware or not to get into these reductionist tendencies of reducing love also in a very limited package, where love is only understood as some emotional experience, only as some romantic experience. We have to realize that ultimately all life is an invitation to embodying aspects of love. So at any given moment, you can check within yourself, are you moving in the direction of love? Are you choosing from lovingness? Or are you in the state of lovelessness, attached to the idea of absence of love? And I say attached to the idea, the absence of love, for the fundamental fact is there is love, here and now. Your body is an expression of love, this planet is an expression of love, the sun, the moon, the stars, the entire intergalactic universe. This whole mysterious play, which the intellect understands so little of, is an expression of love. And as I said, love doesn't have to look a certain way. Even challenges are included in this experience of love, in that great clearing of love. Even the tears are an expression of that love. That's what ultimately leads us into deep compassion. For ultimately, there is only the self. And all this experience is an experience of the self, through the self, within the self. So all love is ultimately arising and moving in the direction of self. And so is, interestingly enough, all hatred. So all the hatred is ultimately self-hatred. Being in a state of conflict, being in a state of hatred, being in a state of stress and isolation, projects that out into the world and gathers and tries to organize around that hatred. While beings who are in touch with that presence of love, naturally love overflows through them and they organize around love. They radiate love. For all love is ultimately self-love, and so is all hatred. All hatred is ultimately self-hatred, for it is only the self that is life. All life is an experience that the self has. All life is an expression through the self. All life is an experience within the self. The self experiences life within his or her own consciousness state. And that same self expresses life based on his or her own consciousness state. So if there is hate dominating, isolation dominating, separation dominating, this hallucination of an isolated identity dominating in the field of awareness of the self, then the fundamental experience is of isolation, of separation, of hatred, of anxiety, of fear. And that naturally overflows in different aspects of one's life. And when one can really experience love, that naturally overflows in every aspect of one's life. And the most important thing for us to realize is that this is a most intimate experience, this experience of love. This is not for us to prove to anyone. This is not about seeking validation. For this experience of love is self-validating. For it is self alone who is self-evident. Everything else becomes evident to the self. But the self is self-evident. So as we can begin to dive deep within this experience of love, of self, as we can cognize love that is here, in that presence that is you, it frees you from the world. And that's what Krishna's advice to Arjuna in the greatest scripture on yoga, the Bhagavad Gita, is. Be a yogi, Arjuna. Be a warrior of love. And live in this world in such a way that you are simultaneously in it, but not of it. And how is that possible? That is only possible when we can live, when we can cognize, when we can remain committed to the experience and the expression of love. That we remain committed to move the way love makes us move. Even though the temptation to organize and project the hatred can be so much around us. But that, the nature of duality, the nature of relative reality. So it is important for us to not get lost in the distractions of the mind with its endless weaving of stories. Stories of victimization of self, stories of your undeservingness, stories of blame, stories of fear. It's endless. If we get lost in that distracted mind and we get lost in that cobwebs of the lower mind, then we never find love. We keep looking for it, but we never find. For love is not to be found, love is to be experienced. For love is your very nature, your very own self. And when we can really see that, then we find that it becomes such a sacred, it becomes so precious, this life of ours, and this commitment to live from love, live from compassion, live from gratefulness, live from generosity, live from wonder, live from courage, live from creativity. It becomes such a precious journey. And you find that the self-sabotaging patterns naturally start to fall away. You're no more interested in living a life which is dominated by conflict. You realize how incredibly powerful you are. For ultimately, life can only be the way you are. This is a great superpower. When we realize that, there is an incredible transformation that happens. That life can only be the way I am. For life is an experience that I am having. And this experience is within my own consciousness state. So if my consciousness state is filled with the value of love, then life is loving, for I am loving. That is not to say that I might not hurt, or I might not feel pain, or the tears might not arise. They are all part of the human experience. But in that underlying understanding, amidst of all this seemingly such a long yet ultimately so short of a life as this mind-body, that underlying knowingness is there, that it's all love. Even these times, at that deepest level of your own being, you know that love is the dominating value. So you can exist in all times elegantly, No one can take away that internal kingdom of love. No one, no propaganda, no individual, no collective can take that away. That fragrance of love is then eternally here. The times change and the events come and go, yet the love continues eternally. For it is through love that we have come. It is through love that we are sustained. And ultimately, to love, we return. So, as you are participating in this magnificent gathering, this is the invitation to really go to yourself and discover your superpower. And in that superpower, which is made up of love, you will realize that there is no opposition. Yes, on the relative field, opposition can show up, but fundamentally, at that fundamental level of being, there is only the self. And that gives you incredible power and courage to be with this life as an expression of love, as an individual committed to love, as an individual who has this deep knowingness, who realizes that his or her whole life happens within the container of love. Love is the container within which it all plays out. That gives you invincibility. So know love and be invincible. Know yourself and know love. Experience love and then practice love. Let us consistently keep returning to love. It's a commitment. We have to return to it over and over again in the relative reality, because there are fluctuations, circumstances, variables, plurality dominates. So we have to keep tuning ourselves to the frequency of love. We must remain vigilant, for there is enough frequencies of hatred around. We must stand guard in the doorways of our heart. Experience love, and then let us practice love. Thank you. Om Shanti, Shanti, Shanti. Hari Om Tat Sat.